Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're here in the home of Linda and Nancy Meade. We officially made it in from the great outdoors, and they've invited us into their warm, beautiful house. And we're sitting here because they're the ones that know everything there is to know about the history of the church at Severn Run, because they have literally lived the history of the church at Severn Run. And so we wanted to sit down with them this afternoon as we take this day to celebrate all of the many wonderful years that Miss Linda has so faithfully served as our office manager, and just hear from both of them of what the experience of this church has meant to them, as well as how they've seen it grow, how they've seen God work, and the amazing things that He's done. As I mentioned earlier, it is their parents that were the founding members of this. And we were just sitting here just a moment ago with both of them and chatting, and we were hearing a little bit of their life story. The family's from Virginia now, right, ladies?
Yes.
Originally the southwest corner of Virginia.
Right.
And I don't know how many of you out there have ever had the opportunity to travel to the southwest corner of Virginia, but you have to travel to get to the southwest corner of Virginia. It is a good long ways, but it is beautiful country, and that's where Mom and Dad came from.
Yes.
You were telling us just a little bit of the story of Dad. He lost both of his parents at a very young age. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
How old was he again?
His dad died about a month and a half before he was born in 1907 from a stroke.
Okay.
And his mother died when he was 5 years old from injuries from trying to help save someone from their house who had caught on fire.
And then how many brothers and sisters did he have?
He had 8 other brothers and sisters. He was the last of 9 children.
The last of 9.
Yeah.
And then you were telling me how they kind of got split up after their parents' death.
The 3 children closest to my father was taken to an orphanage. My dad was the baby at that time, and my grandmother couldn't take care of him.
Mm-hmm.
So they were taken to an orphanage in Richmond, and his brother George ended up in North Carolina, and his other 2 sisters, I assume, were both still there in the Richmond area, because that's where the one sister met her husband.
Okay.
Was in Richmond.
And then some way, somehow in all of this. Now, your mom and dad knew each other from an early age back in Southwest Virginia, correct?
Right.
But at some point, Dad moved up here because his sister moved here.
Right, yeah. He moved here and got a job and lived with them for a while.
How old was he?
He probably 20s.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, 20s or very early 30s.
I'd say probably 20s.
Probably 20s, yeah.
And not married yet.
Not at that point. He did meet his first wife here. His sister, our Aunt Frances, knew his first wife Dorothy, and introduced them, and they got married. And my brother George is the son from that marriage.
Okay.
But then shortly after he was born, circumstances happened, and they ended up being divorced.
Okay. It doesn't matter what decade it is, right?
Right.
Marriage is a tough, it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah. And by that time, my mom, she had lost her mother in the flu epidemic in 1918 when she was 8 years old.
Yeah.
So other circumstances happened, and a sister raised her, and then one of her older sisters moved to Roanoke, Virginia, and got a job. And then when Mom was about 18, I think she left from the southwest corner out there from Wise, came up to Roanoke and worked. And that's where she was when our dad contacted her on a dare.
Okay. There's a dare involved.
Uh-huh.
And I've already heard a lot about this fact that this man was involved earlier on in a lot of shenanigans.
Yes.
In church. So yeah, this sounds like this guy had a streak going.
Yeah.
Okay. What was? Now I know where you guys get your mischievousness from. Also. Yeah. Later on, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be sure to ask them about some of their Vegas trips, but that's a different story. So tell us about this dare.
Well, my dad was divorced at that time, and my brother was maybe 2 years old,
Yeah,
and
2 and 3.
they made a dare that he couldn't find another woman. And he said, yes, he could. So he had sent my mom a telegram, which
Yeah.
she got in Roanoke, and asked if she remembered him, and he said, yeah. And so he asked if he could call her, and she said, yeah. So he did, and he told her, that he liked to see her and that he had a little boy, and she said, well, that's fine, that's no problem, you come on. So they did make contact, and ended up, she came back here and they got married, and my brother was maybe not quite 3 when they got married. And so
Okay.
Mom became my brother's mother, really,
Sure.
because she's the one that raised him all of his life. So he bought this property in the early 40s, and we've lived here all of our lives.
And 2 more shenanigans came out of
Yes.
it.
Mhm.
We were
Yeah.
both born here
Okay.
in this house.
Both of you were born in
Here,
this house.
in this house.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Were you both born in the same room of this house? Or?
Probably
Yeah.
in the back bedroom. I would
Yeah.
think.
I don't think I've ever talked to anybody in their home who was actually born there.
yeah.
Naturally, I remember my grandparents showing me the home that they were
Mhm.
born in, all that. But I don't think I've ever actually sat in the home with somebody who said I
Yeah.
was born in this place.
Yeah. So been here, born here all of our lives, and
Yeah.
so it's
This is
always
home.
been home.
Very
yeah.
much home.
Yeah.
So.
That's fantastic. So then, born here, and then mom and dad got married. When did they get the big idea of this thing called Severn Baptist Church? Like, how did that start and come about? Because that's not that's not just one of those things you wake up one day and say, "Hey, let's start a church." What was the situation?
Mom had been going to the Southern Baptist Church there in Roanoke.
Okay.
That's where she and her
Belmont
sister,
Baptist.
Belmont Baptist there,
Okay,
and so she was used to the Baptist church. And when she came here, Anne Arundel County was very rural.
Okay.
Severn was very rural.
Mhm.
The only Baptist church was in Glen Burnie or Annapolis.
Mhm.
And so she had taken George, and they'd gone to churches here, the local Methodist church here in the area. But it just wasn't the same,
Mhm.
as the beliefs that she'd had. And
Yeah.
Well, that, and she was very interested in the missions.
yeah.
Okay.
And they didn't support missions in the same way that the Southern
Right.
Baptists did.
Right. Okay.
And she was very, very keen on the missions aspect.
So she, she went to the churches, but just is never satisfied. I guess God just kept saying to her, there's a discomfort level there,
Mhm.
and I want you to do something else. And so they had talked about maybe trying to start a church, and didn't know how. And there was a salesman that came through,
Okay.
Insurance salesman.
and Mom was talking to him, and I guess saying what their dream was of having a Baptist church. And so he knew somebody in Virginia, I think, and contacted them,
Okay.
told them about my mom's interest and dad's interest, and they had that person in turn contacted the authorities, the association or the convention here in Maryland.
Okay.
And
Because this is amazing. Because you can't just Google it. There was no way to do that. The fact that God would bring somebody, a traveling salesman, along, who would be able to help them find the answers to this big question of how do we start a church.
Yeah. So they got in touch with the district superintendent, which is now in our convention today is called executive director.
Okay.
Back in there, they called them superintendents. And they also got in touch with Dr. Klein Weiss, who was pastor at Glen Burnie Baptist Church.
Okay.
And they came and they talked with Mom and Dad, and after talking with them, decided, okay, they took it back to Glen Burnie Baptist, and they agreed to become sponsor of the mission church here. And so Glen Burnie sent, I think there were 3 couples.
That was
Glen Burnie.
That was about to be my next question. So 3 couples came from Glen
Glen
Burnie, and then did they already have anybody that was right here interested in
Yes,
attending?
there were neighbors, like the people that lived back behind us,
Okay.
and some others here that were also interested in starting, being part of starting a church.
Okay.
And so they eventually did, so their first service was like April 26th, I think, and something like that in 1952.
Okay, April the 26th, 1952, the first service of Severn Baptist Church.
Right.
Correct?
The mission, yeah.
The
they
mission.
call themselves Severn Baptist Mission.
How many people were there? Do you
There
know?
were I think they said 7.
Okay.
Now, I'm assuming that's 7 adults and not us little kids.
Right, because who was going to count the kids back then, right?
Right.
Right.
I couldn't really do anything,
Right.
And so they met in the house, and our house was like half this size.
Did they in this house?
It was like half this size.
So the
Our house
first
This section here
meeting,
wasn't.
okay, you're saying this section wasn't here?
Right,
No,
not
this
this-
wasn't built until
Not
the
this
70s.
wing was not until the 70s.
This
Okay.
part of it.
But we are sitting in the house where the first church service for Severn Baptist Church ever took place.
Right.
That's awesome.
And so they started, and they had church services on Sundays here, and then once it got too big, then they gave my dad money.
Who was they? Glen Burnie?
The Glen
Baptist?
Burnie and the
Association.
Convention
Okay.
Association.
Was it Baltimore Extension
Yeah,
Society or
I'm
something?
don't
Gave him a
remember all the
loaning
names of
money.
the groups that did that.
Now, what was too big? When did it, how many people did there have to be in this place before they said it's time to go find another place?
The room that was our previous living room is sort of small, so they couldn't have had, I don't know if they could have even had 20 people in there.
So it didn't take very long to
No.
grow out of that.
No, and so then they gave him my dad money, and he built a basement, which is right across the road here.
Okay.
And there's a house on top of it now, but there was a basement, and they met there then.
That he dug out with the horse.
Yeah, and
with Bob.
they were in that building then until 1955.
Okay, so 3 years basically between this house and then the basement next door.
Right.
Okay.
And then from there
The basement was done in 52 or 53 because we moved to Maryland Avenue in 55.
Okay, now here's the thing, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna ask all of Severn Run, guys, don't do the math. It would just be rude to do the math. Meanwhile, though, I want to know how old you two were when the church started.
I was not quite 3 years old.
Not quite 3.
6 months.
6 months old.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I was
7 months at the most.
I wouldn't be 3 until
Because I was,
June.
let's see, April, May, June, July, August, September. 5 months. So I was only 5 months old then, really. Yeah, 5
Okay.
months. I was 5 months
Now,
old.
is there, and I feel like I should know this, but is there anybody from that original crew still at Severn Run?
Not of that original crew. So we've still got a charter member or two.
Okay.
But
Because it was still in its mission status even when it was here in the basement,
Right.
across the road.
And we
right?
were in mission status until 1959.
Okay, so it took 8 years to kind of move out of mission status to
7
where
years,
it would be constituted as its own.
Right. They were
its own
we
church.
constituted as a church 1st of March 1959.
Okay, so then when you came out of the basement, how did it proceed from there?
They
Now, did it have a full-time pastor at this point?
no, we were sharing a pastor. I guess when Dr. Bard, who was the associational director,
Okay.
was preaching
Okay.
for us, and then when we went to when we left here, we moved to Maryland Avenue and Telegraph Road.
Okay.
And they built a building there, and today it's like twice the size it once was.
Okay.
But back then we shared a pastor, Reverend Ulmer, with Grace Baptist in Pasadena.
Okay.
And so he pastored the two churches.
Okay.
And then when he left and went full time at Grace, they called Reverend Wayne Varner, and he was our first really full time pastor.
Okay.
And it was under him that the church constituted as a church.
And then about what was attendance like at that point?
Maybe 100 something.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, because we had, probably 100 and something, because then as we grew, we didn't have enough room for Sunday school. So then we met for Sunday school in the original Ridgeway Elementary School.
Okay.
It was a 2-story building, and we met there in their cafeteria.
Now, you all would have been at the age that you were in Sunday school at this point, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, talk to me about the experience as little girls growing up at the church, at Severn Baptist Church at the time. Like, what do you remember? Because here's the thing. Now, I already know your dad was involved in shenanigans, and I know that you two have, you've been able to create quite the amazing reputation of yourself as fine, sophisticated young ladies. However, I've spent some time with you, and I know some of the shenanigans. Again, folks, we'll get into the Vegas stuff later, but I know some of the shenanigans that you guys, have been a part of, and I'm sure you were a part of that back in the day when you were young ladies
we've
here.
always been good kids, John. We didn't get in trouble. We didn't do stuff.
Be honest with me. You swam in the baptistry, didn't you?
No, we didn't have a baptistry.
You did not.
No. We baptized. For baptism, we went over to Glen Burnie Baptist Church.
Uh-huh.
And the building they were in is now occupied by the
Boys and
Girls Club, right there on Crane Highway, right close to Fifth Avenue, I guess it is. And that's where we baptized on Sunday afternoons.
And did you go swimming after the baptism?
No, it was like ours that we currently have. It was in the floor.
Okay.
And so,
well, that's the best kind of swimming.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, give me some of the experiences as young girls in church. Like, what do you remember? What did you get yourselves into? Give us the dirt. I mean, the real dirt.
Oh, I can remember like Mrs. Knapp in my 4 or 5-year-old class. And just some of the Bible stories and the activities that we would have. And
was there flannel graph involved?
There was probably flannel graph. Yeah. We had the large pictures that SBC put out, along with the lesson plans and stuff. In fact, I still got one of the pictures of a blonde-haired girl under like a cherry tree or under one tree, but the theme of it was like the blossoms on the tree make me think of God's love for me. Okay. And I have always remembered that from a young 4 or 5-year-old child.
And isn't it crazy? I told my mom recently. I said, because my mom was my Sunday school teacher at one point, and flannel graph, of course. And I told her, I said, there are still times when I am reading a story of Jesus while I'm preaching, and I can still see the flannel graph on. I'm experiencing the story as she taught it to me, like that. Right. It's amazing how much that those things are seared into our memories at such a young age.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I remember going from the church building over to the school. Don't remember so much about the classrooms and how we were set up over there, but I do remember going back and forth all the time for that. And Vacation Bible School. And Mom was the Vacation Bible School director or secretary, whatever. And I remember almost every year I had trouble with my ears, so I had an earache. Okay. But that didn't stop us, because Mom still had a function to perform there, that she needed to be there. So while Linda got to go to Vacation Bible School, I got to lay on a pallet next to the desk. Yeah. Because I wasn't, with my ears bothering me and stuff, I couldn't go into class and stuff. So I do remember that. Okay. And then as we got a little bit older, I remember helping in the nursery with all the preschool kids. I'd help my mom whenever it was her scheduled time to serve. Then we would help work with her.
How old were you when you started serving at church?
Probably a young age, like maybe, maybe 7, 8, going in
Okay.
helping with the kids.
Yeah.
Of course, I couldn't do anything with the little infants, but
Sure.
the older kids, I could play with them. I could do stuff with them.
Yeah.
So that's what I did, and I think that's part of where our love for kids
Mm-hmm.
came from, was from working with the children
Because
from a young age in church.
you guys started there, but you've never stopped.
Correct.
You guys are you still working with our little ones.
Yeah.
It's amazing. How many years would you say now at this point? Including when you started back then? Again, nobody does the math here.
Probably about 62 years.
Wow. That is
Over
amazing.
60, and you probably got
Yeah.
a good
Yeah,
few
'cause we
years
lived-
ahead of me. So
Yeah. So I started keeping the choir children
when you were about 10.
there at Maryland
Yeah.
Avenue while the choir practiced. I would keep their children during the practice there. So I was probably
And then
10 or 11.
And then you helped in the nursery area with Mom at different. When you
Yeah,
were
and I
younger
helped
than that
and
too,
I helped with
so,
others. Yeah, there. Yeah.
So what's that experience like for you guys now in terms of, serving so much back then? There's quite a few people at the Church of Severn Run that you took care of when they were a child.
Oh yeah.
And what's that like now to see them as adults, to see them with their own families, to see them in church, loving, serving God? Like what, how does it feel? What's the effect on you?
I guess you're humbled by it,
Mm-hmm.
that God gave us the chance to have a part in those people's lives, because I taught 5th and 6th grade for 15, 20 years,
Wow.
maybe as a lead person there, and
That takes a lot of grace.
a number of adults some of them are still at our church today that worked with me as teachers, and then left the children's area, went into the students working there. But seeing kids that you took care of and helped to love on in the nursery when they were babies, when they were born, and then see them grow up, and some of them actually married other church kids they grew up with, and now we're seeing their families, them grow up and have families of their own now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like second and third generations that we've been able to see. Some of the kids that we had a part in helping to take care of and even teach through missions organizations. Like I used to help with what they called Sunbeams, which today would be called Mission Friends. That was like
Sunbeams.
the 4 or 5 year olds, that I started helping to teach. And some of those have, some of the people today that were here through the years now that we grew up with, and then saw them grow up, their children grow up. Some of those have become pastors today.
Wow.
Some became music people.
Missionaries.
Some became missionaries.
Okay.
So, it's been amazing to know that you had a part in sharing Jesus with them when they were little, and then seeing them grow up and now share that with their families and it continue on. So, it's been neat to see the different generations grow up in the church and how that so many of them went on to follow Christ into full-time vocations, and others just were regular faithful church members and supported the church. And
that's incredible.
And then even when they left here, one of the things I guess with Severn was, because of being so close to the military base, we always had a lot of military.
Lots of transients.
And
right?
so there's still so many people today that we still correspond with that have been here through the years.
Okay.
And so, those people were always instrumental as well in the history of the church, and coming to serve and just be part of the church in any way they could. We had a number of chaplains who have been members throughout the years that would, at the time, the pastors would let them preach on Sunday night when we had Sunday night services.
Okay.
So they got a chance to preach not only at Fort Meade, taking care of the military people there, but then got to share their gifts with us here at Severn too. So
Okay.
yeah,
That's amazing. So going back then, just in terms of what it was like to be little girls here, you got to tell me. Okay, people want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. What's the most mischievous thing she ever did at church?
Gosh, I don't know, because like I said, we were good kids.
Yeah,
We didn't get into
Here's
trouble.
the thing. I've heard the stories. Don't make me spill it all right here.
No. That's just since we've been adults.
Oh, okay. That's
Coming
just
up kids, we were good.
Now, were you afraid? Were you afraid that
listened
you'd
to
be
our
you-
parents? You
Yeah.
know, you were when you went to church.
Yeah.
Church, was a very reverent place.
Yeah.
And you behaved. That was God's house,
Right.
and so you behaved yourselves. Now, and we had our friends, and we talked in church when we shouldn't have. Chewed
Okay.
gum in church probably when we
Did
shouldn't
you?
have.
Okay.
Although
Honestly,
Mom did give some of her nieces some gum to keep them quiet because they were worse.
Did you ever put the gum under the pew?
No.
You never did that.
No.
helped to clean it up sometimes,
But we did.
never did.
But we would go down on work days because Daddy used to be Daddy was like chairman of the building
Okay.
grounds committee,
Mhm.
trustees and all, and they would have regular work days, and we'd go down as kids. I mean, I remember when the building was built on Donald Avenue when they were clearing everything off. Daddy was down there doing stuff, and I was down there roaming around in the woods, and I tripped over a log, a
Okay,
tree
yeah.
that they had cut. I remember that even to this day. I remember that. And then I remember inside the sanctuary building when they had the big wagon with those huge wagon wheels, but they had the wagon in there so they could put up the ceiling and stuff in there. So a lot of things with source.
They brought in a wagon,
Yeah.
like a horse and buggy wagon.
And it was like a wagon that they would use in the fields. So that it had the humongous wheels on it.
And they brought it in order to put the roof
Right,
on.
because they
the
didn't
church
have
building.
scaffolding
To
or
put the
whatever to
ceiling.
do.
Okay, yeah.
If you, I guess you were there. Were you there?
I was not there for that.
You were not there, but
not,
we had.
not for when they put the.
We had the hardwood ceiling up. It wasn't.
Okay.
It was not sheetrock.
Okay.
And so they had they used that wagon as their scaffolding, if you will. And then they could set ladders, of course, on that, and then they could get up to do whatever it was that they needed to do. But it was neat doing that, and I mean, we helped with work days. I mean, up until the church really, we moved down to where we are now, and they stopped having the regularly monthly things.
So at every stage of the story so far, whether it is, God puts a thought in Mom's heart that says, "Hey, I can't find a place that I can't find a place that represents the way that I understand I need to be worshiping my Father." From that to a traveling salesman, from that to the traveling salesman hooking them up with, other local churches and the Southern Baptist entity, to some funds to help build a basement. Now we've built another building. What was the faith like of the people moving forward? It sounds like there was always a desire to say, we need to do more, we should do more, we must do more. What was the spirit of the place back then?
I think that's always been the spirit, from the vision that Mom and Dad first had to see people come to know Jesus as Savior, and then the missions part of it. And I think that the people that have come through the years at any place we've been, again, that strong faith of the vision, that original vision, I think spurred everybody on in each of the areas, each of the times, from the time, when they decided, okay, the church on Maryland Avenue is not big enough for us anymore. We're growing. We need to expand, and people prayed, about, okay, where are we going to find another piece of land to go from or go to? Each time God provided that place. My dad happened to know the people that owned the property at Maryland Avenue. He knew the man that owned the property at Donald Avenue, and through talking with him, convinced he and his wife that the church, they needed to sell it to the church so we could build a church building there. And then again, the people, the church continued to grow. I think because people were faithful to God and the vision that He'd given.
Yeah.
And from there, then they went on to build the 2 educational buildings.
Okay.
There during that time frame, the area here and around us started growing. Province's development went in. Right. Chapelgate area in Odenton went in, and so you started seeing the area grow. And as the area grew, the people decided, hey, we need to expand, either through building or adding new staff, in order to be able to reach more people for God.
Right.
And then going from there into, okay, even Donald Avenue is a little too small, so now we got to look at doing 2 services, 2 Sunday schools, 2 worship services. And people just always seemed to step up and do what they needed to do, again, just to see people come to know Christ, from the community, and to be able to reach out and do what they could in the community, to further God's kingdom. And so it didn't matter where they were. God just seemed to always provide a group of people that were willing to sacrifice and do what they needed to do. I mean, the volunteers, even when we moved to Donald Avenue, they had a group of men that built the block building and got it up under the roof. And then our dad, he came in the evenings after working and led a group of volunteers to finish the interior of that building.
Okay.
And so you always had people that were willing to do whatever it took.
Yeah.
To see that the buildings were taken care of, the grounds were taken care of, anything that would be attractive to the community, to reach them. And that's just what the people have always done.
That is amazing. It's amazing. So from little girls, and then you spent your teenage years at Severn Baptist Church. What was that like? Like, how did the experience of church change for you over the course of those years as you got more involved as you grew up?
I'd say the main focus for us at that point was the youth choir.
Yeah.
That was where all of the youth activities really centered.
Okay. Was around the choir?
Was around the choir.
Okay.
And that's what really built our group up. Al Hunter was the choir director, and Al and Margaret Negrexes, the Chamberlains, were some of the sponsors and the groups, the adults, who really were intricately involved with the youth choir. But that's really what I guess our youth activities really centered around, and we went on a lot of trips, youth choir trips, both north and south. Broken down buses as we traveled, and but that was part of the fun, and everybody just always seemed to have a really, really good time. But we had the opportunity, not only through the choir but through other things, with helping with the different the younger kids with the mission activities and stuff, having an opportunity to serve there and to grow and to develop leadership in those various aspects. But we had that for a while. We had Youth for Christ at Severn. What else did we do?
And you guys were actively involved in all of that stuff all along the way.
Yeah.
Hey, now you said broken down buses, plural.
Yeah.
Did this happen a lot?
We would have different buses. Like the church owned a couple of school buses. And so invariably we'd be on a choir tour trip, and something was going to happen with that bus.
Yeah.
And so then we'd break down on the side of the road, and sometimes people from the churches that we were going to would come pick us up and take us to their place, or else we just had to wait outside the bus until Al and whoever were able to get the bus fixed and running again.
Good times.
And then we had this bus that was painted blue, and we called it the Blue Goose.
The Blue
The
Goose.
Blue Goose.
I feel like
And
that's making a
that's,
comeback. I feel
that,
like at some point the Church of Severn Run is going to have another Blue Goose.
But that was
Yeah.
pretty neat, and they ran that. Not only we used it on the choir tour, but they also used that for going into the community to pick children up to
Okay.
bring them for worship and stuff. But we did a lot with that, and
Yeah.
that was during the time too in the 60s. Well, 68 was when I got sick and stuff. So I kind of had to pull back for several years there because I had that hepatitis. And,
Okay.
Yeah, the youth choir, we would travel and sing at churches in the area here, as well as out of state or whatever, and we would do like a program of anthems or whatever, and we learned it all by heart. So we did like an hour's worth of anthems and hymns and songs, and then we changed into different outfits, which sometimes they thought were scandalous because we changed out of our long dresses and things, and the guys out of ties and shirts, and we would change I remember the first time we ever wore a pair of culottes.
Oh boy.
They had made culottes for us.
Yeah.
purple,
And that
as
was-
I recall. They were
Yes,
purple.
and that was like, oh my goodness, but we were doing musicals,
Yeah.
and so we changed into that attire for musicals.
Okay.
And
See, I knew we were going to get to scandal somewhere.
There was at that time in the mid to late 60s, early 70s, there were a lot of youth musicals that we did, and so we were able to share those. We did the Living in the Spirit, which was Philip Landgrave, and some of the adults were involved with us in that musical, and we had the privilege of doing that for our state convention with Philip Landgrave leading us at Montrose Baptist one year. So, like Nancy said, the choir tour was just a big thing. We also participated in the youth music festivals at Ridgecrest, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And we're able to participate there and represent our state convention there with that. So it was sort of the anchor for us as youth, because we didn't have a lot of other youth activities.
Right.
And so from that, gleaned into some of them helping with backyard Bible clubs and things like that. And then also they had a younger children's choir they called the Cherub Choir. And so some of our, kids and all would help out even with that, with the younger.
We got the sunbeams and the cherubs going on, the great Blue Goose.
Yeah.
So
Friends,
Yeah.
RASGAs,
RSGAs.
Yeah.
Girls Auxiliary, and
And for those of you that don't know it, RSGAs is kind of it's kind of like a Southern Baptist version of what am I trying to think of?
Yeah.
Of what? I can't think of it.
the one that they do it usually it's starts with an
Of
A.
the Boy Scouts and the Girl
Yeah,
Scouts. It's
yeah.
kind of the there we go. That
What's
was
the
hard.
other one that they do? Used to be Independents that did it all the time.
Oh, Awanas.
Awanas.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
similar to
Awana,
Awana
yeah,
type
yeah.
But it was a
activities,
missions arm of the church, and you did things.
and it was done through the WMU and the Brotherhood of the Church at that time.
So all this talk about a youth choir, see, ladies, tell me what you think. I've been trying to get Patrice to let me in the choir now for a very long time. I'm thinking maybe I just start a youth choir. And what do you think?
If you could do it, John, I'd be amazed. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I hear that as a go. I hear that as a make it happen.
Hey, you know what? If you don't
Yeah.
try, you'll never know.
Well, there you go.
know? I
And-
mean, somebody's got to lead out.
And so all I'm saying is you all heard it here first, okay? Take that, Patrice. But
you'd have to do it under the guidance of Patrice.
under the guidance, I don't think she'd. Yeah. I don't think she'd let that happen.
You just couldn't go out on your own and do this. You have to do it with her.
See, there's
she
always
has
a stipulation
to,
somewhere.
Oh yes. Oh,
So
yes.
here's the thing. So you teenage life at Severn, at the church at Severn Run or at Severn Baptist Church as it was at the time, and then it wasn't too long after that, right? That you said, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna jump in here and I'm gonna take this job." Tell us how all of that came about.
I had graduated from high school
Mm-hmm.
and was getting ready to, well, actually did go 1 year to college at Anne Arundel Community College. They had just moved to their Arnold campus the year I started. And at that time, in the came summer, I was going to have to get a job because I didn't have any scholarships to help pay for me to continue going on. And our pastor at that time had submitted his resignation.
Okay.
And so the lady that was the secretary at that point, they let her go when he was leaving. And so they wanted somebody from the church that would know the people and could do it. And
they being the deacons.
Right, the deacons. And so they came and asked me if I would consider serving as secretary during the summer.
Okay.
And so I said, well, okay, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I needed a job that would help to pay for it. Didn't really have any experience other than a bookkeeping course and some typing I had taken in high school.
Okay.
Through the guidance of my guidance counselor, and
Mm-hmm.
suggested I do that because he said, if something happens, go to college, you'll have at least a little bit of a background. And so that's sort of how it started.
Okay.
That was in the 1st of July of 1968. And they didn't call a pastor until like November of that year. And he didn't start until January.
Okay.
Of 1969.
So you were the lone employee, fresh out of high school, of the church.
And it was a janitor.
For how many months?
And I was there from July until January when the pastor came.
Okay. 7 months. Wow.
And when
6 months?
so the deacons, and back then it was church council, and they were sort of my bosses, I guess you could say. They sort of instructed me as to what needed to be done and when it needed to be done. And then when the new pastor came, which was Dr. Neil Wilson, the church was in a lot of really bad financial situation. And it got to the point where people would not deliver oil to us unless it was cash on hand.
Yeah.
So it was tough. And so I went on part-time at that point, just trying to help get our finances back into the shape that they needed to be in. And so I worked at the church part-time and went to school part-time, and finished my associate's degree. And then as the church was able, and the finances grew, and we got out of the place where we were of financial difficulties, they were able to increase my hours back to 3/4 and then full-time.
Okay.
And at that point then, our convention started offering classes for secretaries of the churches to go to get training. And so the church allowed me to always go for that kind of training.
Yeah.
So I would do that, and just sort of learned by experience as time went on through that. And then I guess in 1977, I think it was, they offered the convention, the Southern Baptist Convention, had developed a program for church secretaries similar to what the Professional Secretaries Associations were.
Yeah.
And one of the ladies that wrote that, Lucy Hoskins, and some others came to our state and did the training. We had 2.5 days of training, and going through all about what Southern Baptist meant and our Christian faith, and just different things, how to operate an office, what to do, and how to do things. Yeah. And then you had a 2-hour exam after that.
Okay.
And
you passed it, right?
And I did.
Okay. I just want to make sure. With flying colors,
yes,
I'm sure. Yeah.
And then we were certified as ministry assistants in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Okay.
And then from there, then they kept offering different classes, which would give us continuing education unit. Those, so I had over 60 or 70 some hours of that. So I was on the advanced level of that.
Okay.
And so God just.
So yeah, at what point?
When I first started, I was going to college to be a elementary school teacher.
Really? Okay.
And at the time when I finished college, because I'm going part-time, there was an abundance of teachers, if you can believe that, in the county. And so by that time, just going through all the other training and everything I'd gone through, God sort of changed my mission of what I was doing. I felt was the calling I was supposed to do. I still taught, but it was in Sunday school.
Yeah.
I taught the children there at the church. So I still did teaching, but I had gotten to the point where I just felt God had called me into the vocation of what I was doing. That's what I was supposed to be doing.
And Linda, there is such a huge amount of inspiration to me, especially to young people, I think, in that story, because that's a story right there of, I think, too many people, it's too easy to sit back in fear and not move towards something. And your story is a story of somebody that kept moving. You did not stop. You didn't, a lot of people will stop and go through that period of, hey, listen, I want to find myself. I want to know exactly what it is that I'm going to do before I step out and do it. And, sometimes the way that we find what we're supposed to be doing is we just stay active. We keep moving toward whatever door God is opening. We just keep walking into it. And you're an amazing story of that. Like that's what you did, and that led you to 52 years of service at the Church of Severn Run. That's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest highlights of, would you say, of your ministry?
Well, I guess, just I had the privilege of working with 3 ministers, which is unusual in 52 years.
I know, it really is.
Lead pastors.
Yeah.
Dr. Wilson, he was there for 8.5 years.
And so that everybody knows and understands that, what you mean by the fact that that's rare is that you don't usually get to work with pastors that long term.
Right. 2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years is a maximum in a lot of places, unfortunately.
Right. And Dr. Wilson was there 8.5 years and then left our church and went to the Baptist Convention in Maryland.
Okay.
And worked with Skycroft and Brotherhood.
Okay.
And then about 7 months after he left, Pastor Bill Ferguson came. And I worked with him for 18 years until he retired. And during Neil's pastorate, we saw the church grow because provinces came in. We saw people at that time. Sunday school even was averaging over 400 people, and just saw the church grow. And that's when we thought, okay, we needed to build or add staff, and we didn't do it.
Yeah.
And numbers went back down.
Yeah.
And then when Bill came, we started building numbers. Our numbers started coming back up again, because it always goes down when you don't have a lead pastor. And it did rebuild, and we built 2 buildings, 2 education buildings. We built or had added additional staff, second staffers in his pastorate. And then when he left, it was like 3 years of interims. And that was very different of working with interim pastors, a different one each year.
Right.
Until Pastor Drew came.
3 years of interims. That's a lot of that's a lot of interims.
And at the time we began looking for a pastor in 95, Pastor Drew had just gone to Greenbelt Baptist.
Okay.
So God had a purpose for him over there for 3 years before he came to Severn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then so through him then being here was that now 22 years,
Mm-hmm.
How
um,
about that?
that we've seen a lot happen. The church relocated. We were in the process of looking for land when Pastor Drew came, and he
Right.
knew that.
Yeah.
And so, going through that experience of remodeling the old building in order to sell it, and then, relocating to where we are today, and just seeing the expansion of the church. I mean, when you think about 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 people that we had coming, um, you know, 3 services, just to see the youth take off, the children's department. I mean, being able to have full-time children's
Mm-hmm.
staff people, and just seeing all the different things that the church was able to do. I mean, where we've expanded into first working in the homeless in Baltimore with Mark Barnes, who was our worship pastor during the time of Pastor Ferguson's tenure, um, to seeing where we are today, with continuing to do the mission stuff. I think that's been one of the big things. The vacation Bible schools, the block parties that we've done through the years, just different things that have reached out into the community.
Mm-hmm.
That's just always been a neat thing. The youth, seeing them go on mission trips, through Centrifuge and different parts of the groups that they would go with, and seeing them go to different areas, and how it changed the lives of the kids that went.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just been so many different things that God's allowed us to see, and I think part of it is, when there's a vision for things, and then you're able to be part of that vision, and then to see how God brought it to fruition and how it affected people's lives.
When you think of all the people who have come through the doors
Yeah.
at Severn Baptist, the church at Severn Run, I mean, just thousands of people whose lives have been touched.
Yeah.
And they went
It's
all
just
over.
amazing.
They've gone all over
Just
the
amazing.
world, and people all over the world knew about us before they ever came here, because somebody that had been a member here had told them, if you ever get to Fort Meade area, you got to check out this church. And so
And it all started right here in this house.
Mm-hmm.
Like it gives
the
me cold
influence
chills.
has
It
been
really
the
does.
influence has been worldwide.
Yeah, it gives me cold chills. It really
I think
does.
it's amazing when you're obedient to God,
Yeah.
how He blesses,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things I think that I thank my mom and dad for is
Yeah.
their faithfulness, but their obedience to God,
Mhm.
even in the really, really tough times.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of really, really tough times,
And that's what I was about to ask you guys is I think I've grown up in church all my life, and have been in many different churches with my dad serving as a pastor, and then with my own ministry life, and it's real. I've seen a lot of what I would call church consumerism in my lifetime, and what I mean is that people oftentimes kind of pick out a church like they're shopping for, this spring's latest outfit. And we come in and we make the decisions based off of how much we like the message from the pastor that day, how much we do or we don't like the music, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. I mean, certainly we should all be at a church that we like and we feel comfortable at, but there's a difference between that and listening to your all story, because this is a lifetime now of being with the same people, which means you've seen people at their very best, and you've seen people at their very worst. You've seen church at its very best. You've seen church at its very worst, and yet it didn't matter what happened. You've always been there. You've always been faithful to these people, to this portion of the kingdom called the Church of Severn Run. Mm-hmm. And ladies, that faithfulness alone is amazing. But how hard has that been? How, at different times, did you ever honestly, did you ever want to throw in the towel and quit and say, hey, there's got to be a better place to be than this?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think in thinking back, my mom said that when they first talked about starting the church, the one minister, I guess it was Dr. Bard, he was a superintendent back in those days, and said to my mom, I don't think you're going to make it as a church.
Yeah, he said.
And my mom said,
you'll never have a church here.
My mom going down the sidewalk said she just put her arms out and said, "Oh yes, there will be." And I think of
that's the best story.
That was the kind of faith that she and my dad had, that it could succeed. And there's been a lot of times when through the years that there were times when we could have gotten mad enough and left because of things that occurred. Things always happen, and you have to be careful of not taking it personally. But there were times, okay, you had to work through it with God to get through the situation. There's been some rough times in the church, especially in being the secretary, church office manager, whatever you wanted to call me at that point, of different situations with staff through the years that was not pleasant situations. And I remember some of those times, where those of us that were still on staff were really criticized. And, in those days, they tried to let people go gracefully and not cause a lot of strife within the church, and let those people be able to go on to another church or wherever God was leading them to. But sometimes you got misunderstood, and it took a lot of rebuilding after some of the experiences we went through. I think those were some of the toughest times of trying to rebuild and go on. And as time went on, then God showed people who had differences of opinion with us that we were right in what we did, the personnel committee did at those times. And then God, and other times when people would follow other staff people, and God had to do the purging of members from Severn. Those were tough times because a lot of them would have been people who were in service positions there, leadership, and to see God move those out, that was tough during those times to go through them. But then when that happened, God always brought in new people, and the church increased instead of decreasing. We increased in faith, we increased in numbers, we increased in financial giving. And so God, as painful as it is sometimes to go through the pruning, there was always blessings at the end of it that just helped to reinforce his mission for the church, and to see it grow and reach out into the community even more than it had done before. As I'm listening to you even talk about the tough moments, and there's always going to be, right? I mean, church is family, and in family there's rough stuff. Even though as I'm hearing that and I'm listening to you talk, and I see the stick-to-itiveness that you all have had throughout all of these years, and I think of the things that Severn Run has had to face. I think of even the difficulties right now that we all experience during this COVID-19 season. I think the Spirit that spoke to your mom that day, the Holy Spirit that spoke to your mom that day, that gave her the courage to say, "Oh yes, there will. Yes, there will be a church." I think that Spirit is still alive and well. I think I think you all have exemplified that
for all of these years, and I think it's still alive and well today, and it will be what drives us forward.
Well, and I think as long as we stay focused
Mm-hmm.
on what our mission is, on
Mhm.
Jesus and
Mhm.
reaching people, that when you go back to the very beginning, that was Mom and Dad's
Yeah.
objective.
Mm-hmm.
And what they pursued throughout their life, and by example, what they taught us,
Mhm.
and the way that they stuck to things.
Yeah.
Because there were many, many times that stuff happened that Mom and Dad could have just pulled out and said,
Sure.
I'm done.
Sure.
But they didn't, you
Yeah.
know. And I mean, we've experienced that as well
Mm-hmm.
with things that have transpired through the years. But that's not what God's called us to do.
Yeah.
And so, as difficult as it is, you pray about it and you stick with it and you stay there until God says, I'm done, But God hasn't told us that yet. And even though we don't I better speak for myself.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I don't necessarily like a
Mhm.
lot of stuff that has happened, and even some stuff that's been directed at me that I haven't liked in the years, but there again, I haven't felt God saying, "Hey, it's time for you to leave."
Yeah.
But it's time for you to stay and to work through this
Yeah.
and to build. Severn's been great. I mean, Severn was gave opportunities
Mm-hmm.
for growth, for leadership, which actually I can say helped me in my job with the
Mhm.
government, because some of the stuff that I did and conferences and stuff and things where I had leadership in those, I go back and say I can attribute that to my experiences at church
Yeah.
and the opportunities that I was given there
Absolutely.
to grow and to lead,
Yeah.
and to show Christ
Yeah.
through it all. And so I think that's important.
And I think just the vision that our parents had, and because they were true to it and the church has been true to it, God's always had his hand on Severn. There's always been something special about Severn
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't been in other churches.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the integration of
Mhm.
races into our church. There were times in the early years when folks of different races might not have weren't
They weren't
accepted.
accepted. I mean, they let them
Um,
come, but they had to sit in the very back.
And then how God used Mr. Harris to come in and be the one to bring integration.
Yeah, he was the
into our
sweetest
church.
older black gentleman.
He
Just
was
as
a
sweet as he could be.
big giant of a man,
Mhm.
and lived across from the building at Donald Avenue, and his wife was sick and he couldn't go to church where he normally went.
Okay.
And he had come and asked if he could come to service there, and he was such a gentle giant, but so great and deep in his faith. And through him coming, we lost a couple families,
Mm-hmm.
but then God opened the doors for other folks, especially, I guess, people coming through the military.
Mm-hmm.
Started coming, and so after those initial folks left, there was never a problem
Yeah.
with people of different races coming to our church
That's
services.
beautiful.
And I think of that especially when we would go to other churches and they're all white.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Severn wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think because of the openness of that as well, God just blessed Severn in a way that,
Yeah.
I don't know, there's just something about his spirit that's been upon Severn.
Because he wants us to look like the kingdom, right?
Yeah,
He wants us to look like the kingdom, and that includes the whole world.
yeah.
So that's beautiful, and I've always believed it's one of the most beautiful things about Severn, is the fact that it is such an amazing expression of the kingdom.
Yeah, somebody asked me one time, well, how many black people do you have coming to your church? I said, I don't know. I said, I'd have to go back and look at who the families are and
Mm-hmm.
to be able to determine that. I have no idea. They're just, You know, they're people.
Yeah.
And they're fellow church members, and we don't look at
We-
whether you're black, white, polka dot, or whatever color God made you to be. We don't look at that. We don't think about that. That's not something that, you know, oh, we have 10 people or we have 20 people, or that's never mattered to us.
And I think it's great the way that it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, what race you are, there's always a place of service. And service in leadership positions, service and support activities, you know. But there's always a place for everybody. If you want to be involved, there's a place to be involved. And that's one of the things I think that's great about Severn, too. It's just the opportunities for involvement and service.
Ladies, I will say this, as you know, as I've just sit here and heard these stories and listened about your life this afternoon, the thing that has stuck with me this entire time is born in this house. Not only were you born in this house, the church at Severn Run was born in this house. You know, this is a place of life, and you've been here. You've been here. This is your home. You've been here all of your life. And yet from right here, from this place, having never moved, never lived anywhere else, you two have been part of a legacy that has impacted the world. Absolutely impacted the world right here from this place. And, you know, I thank you for that. I really do. It means a lot. And so much so, ladies, I will tell you, the church at Severn Run saved my life. It saved my life. And it would not have happened if it wouldn't have been born right here. So you all have meant so much. You mean so much to who we've been, and you mean so much to what we will be and what we are right now. I just want to ask you how, you know, in this moment, because this is an interesting time. Well, you know, even on Sunday, this will be shrunk down, as you can imagine. But at the same time, all of this is going to live for a long time to come. In some way, shape, or form, we will have this in a big way for everybody to see for years on end. It'll always be something to return to. It'll always be a moment to come back to hear a little bit of the story and talk to some of the founding members. You guys are part of the, you know, you guys are founding members of the Church of Severn Run. What do you want to say to future generations of Severn Runners that we don't even know right now? Maybe that aren't even born right now.
I'd say keep the faith. Just keep striving on, no matter what the circumstances. You know, we are trying to finish the anniversary or the history book of the first 50 years, which will tell a lot of the story, which was a story of faith and just steadfastness of those early people who came to be part of the mission and the church. And that's what I would see for now and in the future. Just people need to stay focused, stay true to the original vision that God gave, you know, our parents so long ago of reaching people for Christ in the community, of doing missions, which is, again, is just an extension of that, both in our local community or around the world, wherever. And I think if we stay true to that God will continue to bless Severn for as long as she exists until He comes.
And just remember that it's a journey, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know where it's going to lead, but God does. And like Linda said, you just have to stay faithful and find your place of service and serve.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this, ladies. I don't think I was able to get as much dirt out of you as I wanted this afternoon. You really disappointed me on that one. I can tell you, folks, that if you really want to get the inside scoop, the down and dirty stories those happen when you're at dinner with them, and then they just can't help themselves. They tell you everything. They've lived amazing, exciting lives outside of the Church of Severn Run, but we're so thankful to all that they've given the Church of Severn Run in their life. And thank you, ladies, this afternoon for this. This is a treasure that will live for a very, very long time. Thank you. I know it's going to live in my heart.
Thank you.